Fearing future American involvement in the European War, President Woodrow Wilson created the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, or, as it was then called, NACA. NACA's mandate was simple. It was to undertake the scientific study of the problems of flight with a view toward their practical solution. Land was bought to create an experimental facility with an adjacent airfield. The site chosen was 1,600 acres just north of the sleepy Virginia town of Hampton. The land was flat, fronting on water, which was advantageous when conducting test flights. There, in the summer of 1917, young engineers from the Midwest and North labored alongside Southern students from Hampton Institute to drain the swampland and plow the fields into the Langley Memorial Laboratory. Together, they built the first NACA laboratory building. NACA was ready to conquer the air, but real work couldn't begin until a wind tunnel could be built. The desire to fly has been with humans since the earliest days. People studied birds and sought to create bird-like structures on which to fly, but they failed miserably. As materials and innovation improved, objects could be lifted into the air. According to Chinese legend, one kite was built so huge that it lifted a man into the sky. But that is just a legend. Still, the dream remained. In the 1700s, the French created a hot air balloon, and for the first time, a human rose into the sky. Not satisfied with floating in the air, the quest for controlled flight began in the late 1800s, resulting in the powered flying machine made by the Wright brothers in 1903. But why did the Wrights, two bicycle makers from Ohio, succeed, while other more learned and better financed men did not? The answer was the use of scientific research methods in a wind tunnel. To fly, people had to understand the flow of air over aircraft surfaces. An instrument needed to be built for scientific research, and a method needed to be organized to correctly apply the data. Early experimenters tested devices on the sides of cliffs where there was a steady natural source of wind. Eventually they realized that a steady source of flowing air would be better than relying on the winds. Also, placing a model into a machine would be better than wear and tear on the human body. The first, simplest, and cheapest tool for moving test models at high speeds was the whirling arm, a sort of aeronautical centrifuge. The machine had an arm 4 feet long and spun by a falling weight acting on a pulley. Speeds of only a few feet per second were reached. Eventually, longer arms and a steam engine were added. The whirling arm provided most of the systematic aerodynamic data gathered up to the end of the 1800s and into the beginning of the 1900s. Its flaws, however, did not go unnoticed. Test results were often poor, as the arm's egg beater action set all the air in the vicinity into rotary motion. Aircraft models on the end of the arm, in effect, flew into their own wakes. Something better was needed. That something was the wind tunnel. Somewhere along the way, Frank Wenham in Great Britain realized, as Sir Isaac Newton and Leonardo da Vinci before him realized, that you could either move a model through the air or blow air past a stationary model. In 1871, Wenham built the first wind tunnel, and gradually progress was made to understanding the forces of flight. The wind tunnel Wenham built is, in principle, the same as we use today. A wind tunnel consists of an enclosed passage through which air is driven by a fan or blower. The heart of the wind tunnel is the test section, in which a scale model is supported in a carefully controlled airstream which produces a flow of air about the model, duplicating that of a full-scale aircraft. The flow field is measured by balances and test instrumentation. However, the whirling arm was still the preferred method of testing even into the beginning of the 1900s. Scientist after scientist continued building their data on years of whirling arm research. So again, why did the Wright brothers succeed when others failed? because they carefully and systematically sorted out all the data then known about flight. They applied rigorous standards of analysis to the tests they themselves ran. And they carefully evaluated their own results, whether successful or not. This was the start of true, effective wind tunnel testing. The Wrights knew that lift was not a problem to flight. Other inventors had proven that heavier-than-air objects could raise into the sky. The problems were stability, control, and thrust. Thrust is the force which propels an aircraft forward. If thrust is powerful enough, it will overcome weight and drag. Much is known about the Wright brothers' work on airfoils. In the short span of only 3 months, their wind tunnel tests produced the data needed for building their 1902 glider and the powered aircraft to follow. During this short span of time, the Wrights leapfrogged other aerodynamicists the world over. Lesser known is their work on propeller motion. In order to sustain lift, enough thrust is needed to keep an airplane's wings aloft. This is when they discovered that the propeller theory back then was not even theory. It was all guesswork. So armed with the knowledge of their lift tables, because that's all a propeller is, a moving wing, the Wright brothers set about and thought up the theory of propeller motions, principles which are still used today. They set about using the logic of mathematics and determined that they needed 66% propeller efficiency to generate enough thrust and lift to get their flying machine into the air. Numerous propeller designs were tested in the wind tunnel first, before they found the one design which would generate the needed thrust. Building the Wright 1903 Flyer was only the beginning. More planes with other designs followed. Advancements were still crudely made, and then the world plunged into war. By now it was vital that America reclaim its leadership in the air race. Government support in aeronautic research was focused on work being performed at the Langley Memorial Laboratory's wind tunnels. Among some Langley tunnel firsts were the nation's first streamlined aircraft cowling, a covering over the engine that reduces drag, flush riveting which reduced drag, advances to the swept-back wing, research that aided in breaking the sound barrier. Since the 1920s, Langley research propelled the United States to a major position in international aerospace science. It is little known today, but it is a fact that every major American aircraft in World War II was tested at a Langley wind tunnel. The skies over Europe and Asia are free today, due to the good men and women of our armed forces and the people from Langley who back them. In the late 1950s, NACA became today's NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. Langley Memorial Laboratories changed its name too. It was, and is now known as, NASA Langley Research Center. When the United States wanted to look beyond Earth's atmosphere and to create human-carrying craft that could get us into space, the government turned to Langley for leadership. Among the NASA accomplishments at Langley are the genesis and testing of the Mercury space program, the development of rendezvous techniques which made possible the Apollo moon landing, the design and testing of other spacecraft, and the testing of the fastest plane ever flown, the Hyper-X. The success of wind tunnel research from Langley has been felt in military, government, and commercial applications.
When the Columbia tragedy occurred, we had some data from the vehicle as it was coming in that showed the heating rates and that sort of thing. We were able to take models of the shuttle and do deliberate damage to the leading edges to try to simulate the same data that we were getting from the flight vehicle. And that was how we were able to pinpoint where the damage occurred and how extensive it was. Currently, we are working very hard on NASA's newest launch vehicle, Ares 1. Ares is the entire vehicle. It includes the launch vehicle and the upper stage.